So we go by the iPhone. Oh, it's 2 o'clock now. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. It's my honor and pleasure to welcome you during this session. This is supposed to be the last session, and as we say in Arabic, ختامه مسك. Can you help me translating that, Salim, please? ختامه مسك means the thing which comes in the end, usually it is the best thing. So I'm sure that our presenters will make this true. We have very distinguished presenters, and this talk is about innovations for learning and teaching and curriculum. So I'm suggesting that we want their presentation to be innovative, non-lecturing, audience-based. So in this way we can give them more time to include the discussion time during his presentation. So let me welcome the first presenter, which is Dr. Douna Kولترز, who is going to talk about innovations in faculty development for teaching. You know Douna her CV is in the leaflet, so we don't need to waste more time. Please, Douna.
I think I have slides somewhere. Okay. I think I have slides somewhere.
Can we have the slide?
No?
It's coming.
Well, this will be even more interactive.
Anyhow, we can...
Yeah, okay. Oh, here it is. Let me see. No. Does anybody know where the slides might be?
Salim, slides. Slides.
All right, well. Okay. All right. Well, I always said good teachers have to be flexible. So let me kind of work without them for now. I've been asked to speak to you about faculty development and innovations in faculty development. And as I was listening today, I realized that this entire conference has been about innovation and change and leadership setting a vision and changing the institution. The reality and the truth is, if I asked you, who really creates change in your institution? Your faculty. If faculty aren't on board with what's going on, then faculty do not change. And they will not create the change you need. So what I hope to do today in a very brief time is a couple of things. I hope to have you think about faculty development in a slightly different way. I hope that we can construct some principles of faculty development so that you have a framework in which to go back to your institution and do it. And lastly, if there's time and we find my slides, I'd like to share with you some of the programming that we do in the United States to help faculty develop. I want to start, though, by asking you some questions. How many of you in the audience, raise your hand if you either are currently a faculty member or in a past life were a faculty member? How many of you? Okay, a lot of us. Good. My second question, how many of you, and if you're in education as your discipline, you can't answer, but how many of you were trained as teachers? Raise your hand. Okay, if you look around, it's a lot less. And therein lies some of our issues. The truth is that faculty are trained as researchers, not as teachers, right? And we learn to teach in one of two ways. Research is pretty clear about that. Faculty learn to teach either the way they were taught, makes sense, right? And the more interesting one is the way they learn. So for example, I am a very visual learner. That's why I hope at some point I get slides. Because how I learn is by what I see. And I do a lot of that in my teaching. But the truth is, not all our students are like that. So, how do we engage faculty in learning something in which they haven't been trained, they have no background, and in many institutions, they're not rewarded? I do have a flash. Oh, okay. I had sent it, so I thought you had it. Excuse me. It's under presentation. Okay, thank you.
We apologize for this.
Okay, hopefully they're going to find it. So, I guess my question to you is, how do we do that? Okay, my presentation. How do you think we can engage faculty in change? Because the truth is, if you think about how people change, and if I get my slides, I'll show you a change model. What we work with at Tufts, an individual change model. And I use the individual change model because I think somebody this morning said, faculty are the ultimate entrepreneurs. They are individualistic. You never change the faculty. You change individuals within the faculty. And when you look at the research on how people change, there's 5 stages. The first stage, and the hardest for me, is what we call pre-contemplative. That means I am not even thinking about change. And for many faculty, that's true. They've been teaching for a while. Their student evaluations are pretty good, right? They get rewarded, they get promoted. Why do I change? After that, we move into the stage called contemplation. And more faculty now are moving into that stage. That's where I'm thinking about changing, possibly. And a lot of elements, including that you've heard today, the change in students, the change in technology, has led a lot of faculty to start thinking about it. But they're not doing anything yet. The third stage of change is preparation. And that's where you make the commitment to change. You tell someone, there they are. Let's get there. Here it is. The third stage is preparation. You make a commitment to someone. You tell a colleague, I'm going to add problem-based learning. You have made the commitment. And because you make it publicly, you're now committed to it. So you feel obligated. The next stage is action. You're going to take action. You're actually going to do something. But the most important part of faculty development is the last stage. Maintenance. Because if we do not have places to maintain the change, we do what all humans do, we relapse back to our comfort zone. So I'm going to tell you right now what faculty development is not, and then maybe together we can construct what it is. Faculty development is not about workshops to help faculty learn something different to do in their classroom. That is not faculty development, because one workshop in the action phase with no maintenance means they're going to go back to their own classrooms and the change is not going to be sustained because it's not going to work the way the presenter did. For example, Arik Mازور. Arik's an expert in active learning. He gives a workshop. It looks fabulous. He does it really well. You decide you're going to do it. You go back to your classroom, and it doesn't work as well. And there's nobody there. So what do? You go back to what you always did. So thinking about that, what is faculty development? Tell me, when you hear that term, what do you think of? Anybody want to try? Somebody knows what it is. Oh, good. Somebody want to answer for me? What is faculty development then? What is it? I heard something here? Change. Exactly. Thank you. Faculty development is about changing the way faculty think. It's about changing how they think about their students, how they think about their classroom, how they think about their curriculum, how they think about their role in the department, and how they think about their role in the college. There's a study done in the US every 10 years of faculty attitudes, and one of the questions is faculty loyalty. What are they most loyal to? There are 4 areas that they're offered. They're told their university, is that their first loyalty? They're to rank them. Their department, their students, or their discipline. Raise your hand if you think faculty's first loyalty in these studies, and it hasn't changed for 50 years, if you think their first loyalty is to their university. Raise your hand. Okay, 5 or 6. How many of you think that faculty loyalty is to their department? That's their first loyalty. How many of you think their first loyalty is to their students? Raise your hand. Ooh, even fewer. Up, more up there. Okay. How many of you think it's to their discipline? Discipline works. You win. Faculty's first loyalty for the last 50 years in the US has been to their discipline first. So, when we talk about teaching, we have to talk about teaching the discipline. So let me share with you some principles. These are things that we have learned over time, have to be in every faculty development program. And what I want you to do, to think about when I'm talking about these principles, is if you can share some ideas that you do that incorporate these principles. The first principle of anybody who's going to develop faculty is to have respect for their knowledge. Faculty are the discipline experts, right? But what we do in faculty development is help them think about they're not only they're experts in their discipline, but you all are experts in how to learn the discipline because you had to. But you've never thought about that side of it. So I respect, as a faculty developer, your discipline knowledge. But my job becomes to have you think about how people learn it. And that's not easy, because it's been, for many of us, especially me, it's been a long time since I learned my discipline. But that's my job, is to teach my discipline to my students. So I have to know how you learn it. Right? This is the most important one, and this is, I'll come right up here and I'll make the statement. I do not do workshops. I do not do them because they have no value and no coin of the realm for me. What I do are programs that are longitudinal, over time, systematically develop skills, just like your courses do, right? You build your curriculums to systematically build skills. That's what I do. And they have to be realistic. What are some of the challenges to a longitudinal program? What do you hear from your faculty? Well, what do you, as faculty, think when I tell you, I'm going to commit you to a longitudinal program, I'm going to be systematic, we're going to work together, it's going to take hours and hours and semesters, but it's really great. What are the challenges to that? Time? Commitment. Right. You got to get them to commit, right? What's another challenge? Thank you up there. Time. I don't have time. I have my research. I have my students. I have my grading. I have my department meetings. I have my committee consultants. I don't have time to do this. Any other challenges? Interest. Right. Interest. Why should I come to your program on integrating technology into my classroom when I don't believe that technology needs to be in my classroom? I'm not coming. We'll talk a little bit about how we'll explore those. But these are the tensions that go on in faculty development. I can't tell anybody what to do, and I wouldn't presume. But I can create the environment to welcome them in, to meet their needs, and to have them understand the value of committing that time to me. And I have some examples if there's time. Third one, put faculty together in what we call communities of practice. Communities of practice are a concept by 18 Wenger. And I think of community practice as 3 concentric circles. In the middle are your experts. On the second ring are your practitioners. And on the outer ring are your novices. But the goal of the community of practice is to bring everybody into the middle. So we don't have programs for junior faculty, and we don't have programs for senior faculty. We have programs that bring everybody together as a community, with the job being the experts are to help the novices, the practitioners to move into the middle, and we all become better for it. So think of that in terms of the more you bring faculty together, the more you ask them their issues, the more they get to own it, the more they'll be involved. Whole person. And I really want to stress that. How many of you have programs for faculty to develop their careers? Anybody have programs to develop their careers? A couple of people? How many of you have programs to develop their leadership skills? That's the whole person. I find it interesting that in higher education we think because you have a PhD, you know how to manage people, you can put together a budget, you understand trends. That doesn't come naturally. So when we talk about faculty, be thinking of the whole person. How can I develop the whole person? And please, if you're doing any kind of work with your faculty, it's additive, not remedial. You're not going to faculty development because you're bad, or because you're not good, or because you lack something. You're coming to faculty development because teaching is an art and a science. And you're coming to learn about it. You're coming to grow. You're coming to add to what you already know. However, if you go back to the stages of change, you have to provide just-in-time help. I cannot engage any faculty member in revising their course if their immediate problem is, you know, Donna, my students aren't coming to class. I don't know how to grade these papers. I have to meet their particular need before I can get them to think differently. And most importantly, we frame teaching as scholarship. You're not a good teacher because you were born that way, though some of us are more gifted than others. You're a good teacher if you understand the research around teaching, if you do teaching, if you think about teaching, if you reflect on teaching, and most importantly, if you study your teaching. How many of you have tried something new that didn't work? Me. Okay, let's be honest. Hands, come on, hands go up. We all try stuff, right? And it doesn't work. So what do? We abandon it. I tell my faculty, no, study it. Find out why it went wrong. What could you do differently? What do you know about it? Because the truth is, if you had the idea, it's probably good. It just wasn't executed well. So teaching is as scholarly as your research. And if you look at it that way, it becomes much more important to you. I'm going to give you a couple of examples, and then I'm going to let people talk. And I'd like your feedback on this. If you think there's other principles that need to be in place, let's share them here. These are the ones that I've gleaned. Okay, this is an example of a longitudinal program. There's a huge commitment here for our faculty. This is my CELT Fellows program. These people meet with me 9 times a semester for 4 hours each time. 36 hours of their semester, they come together. We do not talk about teaching. The curriculum is based on learning. And I don't tell them about learning. We assign scholarly articles on the principles of learning to individual faculty members who then present it to their colleagues, talk about how it works in their discipline, and ask their colleagues to share what they do in their discipline. The second commitment is you must be peer-reviewed and you must peer review someone else. The trick here is we just don't send them out. We train them. We use a 4-square model offline. If anybody's interested, I can share it. We train them how to do it before we send them out. And it's very collegial. It's not evaluative. And the last commitment, this is a lot of work. The last commitment is every member must come in with a problem or a challenge that they have in the classroom. They have to present it to the group. We call it step-back consultation. They then step out of the group. They have to watch the group for 20 minutes talk about their problem. And they can't say a word. They're dying to go, but, no, can't say it. And then they come back in and they talk about how it changed their thinking and what they're going to try and do differently. This is a huge program, huge commitment. I've had over 100 faculty go through it. You have to apply. I always have at least 3 times more people wanting to be in the program that can be in it. Why? Because they own it, they drive it, they work together, they support each other, they help it, and we're there as a support. Simple as that. They can't get it enough. And if you look at it, it's interdisciplinary. I have a teacher, a physician, a historian, a dentist, a physicist. They love talking to people from other disciplines. They love it because they get to understand how the university works, how their colleagues think, and get good ideas. Now, I'm going to leave us some time, so I'm going to go through some of these. This is one of my favorites. We have a course design institute. Most of us were never taught to design a course. What do? I know what you did, but I called up somebody who caught the course, asked them for their syllabus, picked a book, and started. It's absolutely the wrong way of doing it. This is a 4-day commitment from 9 to 3 to work on your course with colleagues from other disciplines. Faculty love it. There's no incentive. I don't give them anything. But what they get is at the end of 4 days, your course is designed, developed, you have your goals, your objectives, you have your activities, you have your content, you have everything done in 4 days. And you have 14 other people, plus the facilitators, 2 of us, who have helped you do this. Again, I don't have enough slots for the people that want to do it. Just in time. Can't forget just in time. One of the things we do for just in time, we do midterm assessment. What we do is we go into your class, we ask you to leave, because students will be more honest with us than they are with you. We put students through a 3-step process to answer 3 questions, and it's never about teaching. The 3 questions are, what enhances your learning in this course? What gets in the way of your learning? And my favorite, how do you as students contribute to the learning in this course? We talk to the class, we debrief it, we come to consensus, we write up a report, we meet with a faculty member, we talk about what their students said, and we throw around ideas. This just-in-time program has led to more people going to the longitudinal programs because I've met their need, I've answered their problem, I've dealt with their class, and now they're ready to share. Whole person development, you've got to do it. We have an academic leadership development program. You've got to think of something. You just can't appoint department chairs, associate deans, lab directors. You've got to help them. And my favorite program is the bottom one of all times. It's a brand new concept that's come out of the US called mutual mentoring. The old mentoring concept was senior faculty member works with junior faculty member, right? Helps them get along. Truth is, everything you have talked about in this conference, senior faculty members probably can't address. So the mutual mentoring program puts the junior faculty member in charge of their own career. They get a small stipend to create a network. I work with them to do career planning. They map out their career, they map out their needs, then they create the network within the institution, within the department, within the global world, who can help them in their career. So, challenges, I was asked to share challenges. There are many. You can tell me more. I was asked to share some data. I'll do this very quickly. My favorite one is the bottom one. 61% of people who come to our programs report they've made a change. Everything from the way they think to the way they operate. They have changed. So I hope what you come away with is thinking about faculty development, not about giving them new skills, but creating venues for them to think differently about what they do in a collegial, supportive, valued setting. Thoughts? Questions?
Okay, thank you, Donna, for this excellent presentation. And faculty development is really very important, and they are the one who either make it or break it. So each university have to find the best way, and she has given us few excellent ideas. It's my pleasure now to introduce Aryk Mazur, who is going to talk to us about assessment, the silent killer of learning. So Aryk, please. Can the mic on, please?
Are they turning on this mic? Yes, good. Donna, thank you for an interesting talk. I just have one little quibble. When people listen to my workshop, indeed many are inspired and many try it, but it works. It works. Why? Precisely for the reason that Aksai mentioned yesterday. It transfers the focus from the faculty member to the student. It even works if you use social workers rather than teachers. I'd like to start this talk with a little anecdote, something that happened to me exactly 2 years ago. I was boarding a flight in New York to go give a talk in Buenos Aires, and as I sat down in my seat, next to me was a young woman who had just obtained her degree from the University of Chicago, and we started talking. And it turned out that she was working for a cloud-based education company. Now, I don't know how much you know about me, but I had just founded my own cloud-based education company, Learning Analytics, which meanwhile has been acquired by Pearson. So I thought, I better find out what she's doing. It turns out her company was designing flashcards, you know, these cards that have questions on one side and answers on the other, for smartphones. I had trouble not rolling my eyes, because you know, if you're familiar with what I've done, that I don't place a high value on memorization. I managed not to roll my eyes and remain polite. It turns out that very week, I had attended a talk by a psychologist of the University of Washington in Seattle by the name of Ruddy Rödinger, who studies memory. And in a paper which he published in 2010 in Science, he showed that if you study with flashcards, you only remember 35% after 1 week. After 2 weeks, it's not even measurable. I thought, she better know about this. So I bent down and grabbed my iPad out of my briefcase, and I pulled up the paper from Science magazine, and I gave her my iPad. She took my iPad. She looked at it for no more than 10 seconds, and then handed me my iPad back. And she looked me straight in the eyes, and she said, "But we only guarantee that they will pass the test." I had never thought about it that way. And it brought back all kinds of memories. My daughter was a major, a pre-med biology major at Harvard University. So on the weekend, she'd come home with me, and on Monday mornings, we'd drive back to campus. I'd be behind the steering wheel. She'd be sitting next to me in the passenger seat. I'd look over. Flashcards. "Natalie, what are you doing with flashcards?" You know, we would often talk about how to study and how to learn. And she looks up at me and says, "Well, I have to know all these amino acids. I say, I have an app for that. Seriously, I do some of my work is in biophotonics, so I occasionally need to know the amino acids, but I can't remember them, so I look them up. And she says, Dad, we're not allowed to use our iPhone during the exams. That was actually an eye-opening experience because it told me that no matter how hard we work on innovations in education, it's the assessment which ultimately determines what students accomplish. Now, those of you who are familiar with, and actually, if that is the only thing that matters, then we should have listened to this person on the screen carefully 30 years ago. I don't know how many of you know him. His father, Guido Sarducci, one of the characters on an American comedy program, Saturday Night Live. He's long retired, but he was in the 70s, he was a frequent character. And he proposed, in the 70s, I think it was 72, he had a fantastic suggestion, that to create a 5-minute university. The idea is simple but brilliant. Just take 5 minutes to teach what the average college graduate remembers 5 years after leaving college. And some of you are smiling about that, but there is a sad truth about it. In fact, I think it was Einstein who once said, education is what is left after all that is learned is forgotten. For example, his suggestion for Spanish was very simple, you know. The question would be, ¿Cómo está usted? How are you? And the answer is, muy bien, very good. Because if you take several years of Spanish in college, 5 years later, that's about everything you're going to remember. And economics is supply and demand. Business is you buy something and you sell it for more. Anyway, if you have never seen the clip, just Google 5-minute university. It's hilarious. Hilarious, but at the same time, because it has a deep truth, incredibly problematic. Anyway, for 20 years, I have been bashing the lecture. This is actually me lecturing before I changed my approach to teaching, as an outmoded way of educating. In fact, I've been speaking here in previous years on that very subject. And the reason is that lectures focus on the transfer of information. Today, I'm going to argue that our approach to assessment is equally ineffective because much of it is focused on the regurgitation of memorized information and cookbook procedures. And consequently, instead of developing 21st century skills, assessment is focused on ranking and classifying. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to talk about the what, the how, and the when of assessment. I already made the case that the most common assessment used all around the globe, and I visit many educational institutions, is aimed at grading knowledge, and much of it completely factual. But I want to make an important point here today, because I think even assessments that claim to test problem-solving skills do not do so. They test inauthentic problem-solving skills. Let me explain why. If you have a real problem, typically you know what the desired outcome is. You're managing a hedge fund. The outcome is very simple, more money. The question is, how do you get there? You have an interview for a job in London. You go to the airport, the last flight is canceled. You got a problem. The outcome is known to be in London. It's how do you get there? In fact, any problem, whether it's in science or in business or you name it, can be classified according to this pattern. You have a known outcome, but it's the procedure to get to that known outcome which is unknown. On the other hand, most textbook problems don't follow that pattern. Students are given a problem on an exam or on a homework or on any other type of assessment, and they have to apply a known procedure to find an unknown answer. Take my own discipline, physics, for example. Some kind of a description, blah, blah, blah. A car hits a tree. What is the velocity just before the car hits the tree? Students read that and they think, oh, I need to calculate the velocity. What are the tools that I have at my disposition to calculate velocities? They put numbers into an equation and they find the answer. It might be good, briefly, because I think a number of people have touched on it without really articulating it, to talk about Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom was an educational psychologist in the 50s in the United States, and he's most well known for this taxonomy of thinking skills, from lower order thinking skills at the bottom to higher order thinking skills at the top. At the bottom are things like remembering, basically memory and recall, often of disconnected facts. Then there's understanding, which means seeing connections. You could argue that the bottom two are sort of the foundation for higher order thinking skills. Then comes applying, using knowledge in new situations. And I think most of education doesn't even get there. Not that long ago, I was giving a talk on education at a university south of Boston in Connecticut, a very good institution. I won't name any names. And I was giving a talk in the physics department. And after my talk, one of the professors came to me and said, I had something really strange happen in my class this year. He was teaching physics for engineers, and he wanted to make physics relevant for the students. And in order to make it relevant, he put it in a real world context. And the context that he used was baseball. There's a lot of physics in baseball, right? Trajectories of balls, collisions between balls and bats, runners running. So in class, he used examples from baseball. On the homework, he put baseball problems. On the midterm examinations, he put baseball problems. At the end of the semester, he was preparing the final exam, and he realized he had run out of baseball problems. So he put some football problems on the exam. Professor, complained to students, we have never had any football problems. You're laughing about that, but we should really be crying, because what is the hallmark of learning? The hallmark of learning is being able to take what you've learned in one context and apply it in a new context. So I think many students already derail at that third level. The next one is analyzing, breaking things down, critical thinking. Then comes judgment. What are the more productive ways to explore? Or not only that type of judgment, even judgment of one's own learning and knowledge. And ultimately, the goal, and the word that has sort of been the cornerstone of this entire conference, is creating, putting things together to accomplish something totally new. That's where innovation is. Now, it would be good to actually have a concrete example, and I want to, let me go back for a second. I want to give you a little example of a type of problem which actually forces people to be very creative, and then slowly unpack that problem and turn it into a standard textbook problem. Fermi, Enrico Fermi, Nobel Prize laureate, professor at the University of Chicago, was well known for starting his problems with his classes with estimation problems. He would walk in and would say to his students, how many piano tuners are there in Chicago? In order to teach them to make assumptions, to make order of magnitude estimates, to be able to develop the skills that are typically not taught. Well, I'm a physicist too, and I often wonder about things. One Saturday morning, many years ago, I was painting our dining room, and I ran out of paint. So I hopped into my car, and I drove to Harvard Square. And at Harvard Square, there's a hotel that has public parking spaces underneath the hotel. There are 20 parking spots on one side, 20 on the other. And typically what I do is I drive in, and usually there's no spots, so I pull out again into the road, and I pull into this other half of 20 spots. Also no spots, out and in and out and in, until somebody finally frees up a spot. And what usually happens, of course, is that you're in the left half, and then there's somebody in the right half who leaves. You go quickly, and there's another car who takes a spot before you. So that Saturday morning, for reasons that I don't know exactly what they are, I decided to give up on one half, stay on one side, turn off the engine, and just wait. And funny physicist that I am, I start thinking, how long am I going to have to wait? And I quickly made some estimates and then looked at my watch. And sure enough, exactly after the time I predicted, somebody came and freed up a spot for me. I felt so good having able to estimate that just based on a few simple assumptions. Now imagine we put this on an exam. We write, on a Saturday afternoon, you pull into a parking lot with unmetered spaces near a shopping area. You circle around, but there are no empty spots. You decide to wait at one end of the lot where you can see and command about 20 spaces. How long do you have to wait before somebody frees up a spot? I guarantee you, you put this on an exam, your students will go to the dean to try to get you fired. I've not had the guts to do that. Why is this an interesting problem? Well, it's an interesting problem because it requires making assumptions. It requires developing a model. It requires applying that model. In a sense, we go all the way to the top of Bloom's taxonomy here. Now, of those skills listed on the left side of my slide, which is the one that students hate the most? Assumptions, yeah, because there's uncertainty with it. What if you make the wrong assumption? You're going to lose points. So let's take the assumptions out. We just add one sentence. On average, people shop for about 2 hours. Right? 2 minutes is too short, 2 days is too long, so 2 hours is in the right ballpark. So now we've chopped off the top, where maybe a little bit of creativity that has been removed, but it's still, the solution requires quite a bit of creativity. And students would come to you and say, we've never done any parking lot problems. So let's put the model implicitly in there. We say, assuming people leave regularly spaced interval, how long do you have to wait before somebody frees up a space? Now, all that is required is to apply the model that is implicit in the problem to this new problem. And in a sense, we've dropped all the way down to applying. We've taken away most of the higher order thinking skills, and certainly anything that has to do with creativity or innovation. Students would still complain because what does this have to do with what they need to learn? So let's now turn it into a standard textbook problem. On a Saturday afternoon, you pull into a parking lot with unmetered spaces near a shopping area where people are known to shop on average for 2 hours. You circle around, but there are no empty spots. You decide to wait at one end of the lot where you can see and command about 20 spaces. How long do you have to wait before somebody frees up a space? And you say, isn't that the problem we started with? Yes, but somewhere in the book there's this equation which is colloquially known as the parking lot equation. T wait, the amount of time waited, is T shop divided by N spaces. And all that the students have to do is memorize the equation and then use their calculator. So all of a sudden we've now dropped to the absolute lowest level on Bloom's taxonomy. Maybe I've exaggerated a little bit here, but if you critically evaluate the assessments, even assessments given on international tests like PISA and others, fall into this last category. Now, the problem in the 21st century is that computers can do that. And just as assembly line jobs have been replaced by robots, so do I predict that any job related to remembering factual information or rote procedural problem solving will be replaced by computers. So what we should really focus on is not the bottom type of problems, but the top type of problems. And you know, there's an additional problem that we have because of our grading practices. Because if you take a real problem, It's not solved in one step. You try one approach, it doesn't work, you backtrack, you try another approach, it doesn't work, you try again. I would argue that the road to any innovation is littered with failures. Edison didn't just invent the light bulbs. I think he made hundreds of prototypes before he finally had a working light bulb. So that tells you that in order to be innovative, in order to be creative, in order to be a creative problem solver, you must make mistakes. You must be comfortable with making mistakes and taking risks. Unfortunately, you make a mistake, you lose points. Students are afraid of making mistakes. So we have a huge disincentive for students to make mistakes. The other thing is that the assessment produces a conflict, because usually it's the same teacher who does both the assessing and the teaching. But are you the coach or are you the judge? So how do we solve that problem? Well, the only way we can solve that problem is by hiding behind objectivity. But here's the problem. If you go back to Bloom's taxonomy, the only thing that can be evaluated objectively is all the way at the bottom. Anything else is subjective, and therefore we tend to stay away from the more subjective grading, certainly in the sciences, subjective grading of the higher order thinking skills. Let's turn next to the assessment environment. The scene on the screen here needs no words. I think that within a second you recognized what was going on the screen here. And if this picture evokes pleasant memories, I would like to talk to you at the end of this session. What kind of feeling does this picture evoke? Why don't you say it, and say it loud so I can hear it? Fear. Stress. I'm after another word here. There's something else really peculiar about this picture which doesn't occur in any other facet of life. Exam, yes, of course exam. But what kind of feeling?
Terror.
Terror. All kinds of pleasant things here. But there's something else. There is isolation. People are cut off from each other. They're cut off from any other information. Ask yourself, after graduating from college, have you ever encountered a situation where you were cut off from information or cut off from each other?
Never.
No. We work with information. We work with other people. When I write a paper on nanophotonics, there's not somebody sitting next to me saying, you're not allowed to look up that paper by this professor at Yale. You should have known this by heart. I can look up whatever I want, whenever I want. I can talk to whomever I want, whenever I want. Our students are going to be working under the same circumstances. So why do we examine them in a situation that does not reflect the future work environment? Long time ago, I started with open book exams. It took me a while because it was so unusual for me. Now, my exams are even open computer. That means that students can use Google. But let's face it, any question, think about this, any question to which the answer can be Googled is really not an authentic examination question. It doesn't get high up this ladder, this taxonomy from Bloom's. In fact, by giving students access to Google, you make it unnecessary for them to remember things. So in a sense, you've cut off that bottom part and you're forced to work higher up on Bloom's taxonomy. I'll get back to that later on, though there's not much later on because I'm going to finish up in 5 minutes here. So let's next turn to talking about the when, not just the how. Oh, that picture, by the way, this picture here is a picture from an exam going on in my own class. I wish I had more time to talk about assessment, about positive development of assessments. I'm really bashing assessment here without giving much constructive ideas for improvement. But if you're interested you can Google a YouTube video of a talk of mine on this subject, and you can find many suggestions, because actually it turns out there's quite a bit of knowledge and quite a bit of research and quite a bit of ideas about more innovative approaches to assessment. Unfortunately, most people are focused on the input end rather than the output end, and therefore there's much less dialogue about assessment than there is about approaches to teaching. But here, these students are in my class, and they're actually taking an exam, talking to each other, computer open. And the interesting thing is that we do a lot of pre- and post-testing, diagnostic testing, to see how much the students actually learn. And I have shown that the learning gains in this environment are significantly larger than that in a standard educational environment. Why? Because the students take ownership of their learning. They learn not to pass the exam, they study to learn. So let's now talk about the how for the last few minutes here. Because traditionally assessment has been a high-stakes affair. In fact, we heard that from the words you mentioned: pressure, terror, fear, you name it. And this high-stakes affair typically culminates in the final exam. As I said a moment ago, students study for exams, and faculty often encourage them to do so. But high-stakes examination promote cramming. And as we know, cramming only stores information in short-term memory. No retention, no transfer. You may remember that December last year, there was a bomb scare on the campus at Harvard on the day of the examinations, the first day of the examination. I was in Hong Kong, I turned on CNN, and I saw a scene from my own campus with police cars. And a few hours later, I got an email from the dean, sent out to all of the faculty and the students, saying, you know, that he was unfortunately forced to cancel examinations in 4 buildings on the campus. And that he realized that there was a major problem for the students because they had studied for the exam. It was not good to postpone the exam. But think about it. I kept that email because I think it's so ironic. Are you testing the students only because they maintain the information or the ability to do something in a narrow window centered around a particular day? Shouldn't they know what they study forever? Shouldn't they know the skill or whatever they've learned for the rest of their lives? So, instead of studying for exams, we should really have students study for learning so that we can have retention and we can have transfer. In a sense, I think high-stakes examinations are the silent killer of educational innovation. And no matter, this is the key point really that I want to leave with you here, no matter how innovative the approach to teaching, if we do not reconsider our approaches to testing, we will never accomplish lasting change. Instead of studying for exams, students should study for learning and understanding, and assessment should really be used as an opportunity to improve the learning. Typically, grades are used as a measure of where a student stands relative to others. But a much more important function of assessment, namely a reflection on what has been learned, the opportunity to provide that to our students is usually missed. There was a study in the UK where they showed that in the absence of grades, the feedback from the assessment was actually used by students to improve their learning, and more learning took place. And then, of course, there are many other techniques: peer assessment, self-assessment, the development of what a psychologist would call metacognitive skills. Because after all, nothing is worse than having people who are ignorant and who are unaware of it. So in conclusion, we need to rethink assessment so that it supports the learning. We don't want to hear words like fear and terror, because that is not conducive to learning. We should focus on the assessment of skills, not on content. We should change the assessment environment And we should use assessment to encourage students to take ownership of their learning. Because unless we do so, we will continue to educate the followers of yesterday and not the leaders of tomorrow. And just as importantly, our tests and our rankings will continue to inadequately reflect a person's real ability to succeed in the world and be innovative and creative. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eric. Now our turn to talk to Dr. Professor Lok Soet, Director of Maastricht University, who will talk to us about problem-based learning and educational innovation at the Maastricht University.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Let me also thank you and thank the organizers for having invited me. I'm coming from Maastricht University, where basically we don't teach. So, as a matter of fact, I will be standing here to give the variety with the previous speakers, because we're never allowed to do this here. And so I hope you forgive me if I want to stay here just to be able to teach for once in a more ex-cathedra setting. If only then the proof will be in the pudding, and it will be a very poor performance. So I will have no regrets in that sense. But I would like to talk a little bit about the system as we use it, and really challenging a little bit what we've heard, in the sense that we've heard about innovation with respect to the faculty staff and to teachers, and the problem of innovators as faculty people, as was explained in the first talk by Donna Kowalters, was very much that in terms of teaching, the constraints in terms of being an innovator as a teaching staff are to some extent given, as you all saw by the discipline you belong to. And of course, there is an issue here, that is that faculty members as innovators is really the core of the problem in terms of our teaching experience. And what we've tried to do in Maastricht, what we've tried to do on the basis of innovations elsewhere in the teaching area, is to bring back students in the center field. And to really have systems by which a student-centered education is basically, as Mazur was explaining to some extent, the learning process with students should become centered into our system. Hence, no longer ex-cathedra lectures, but really have small groups of students together discussing various problems and trying to find indeed the procedure to come up with solutions. Now in physics, the examples Greg gave were fascinating, because they illustrate that these procedures are basically require the creativity in terms of figuring out models. And what we discovered basically with the help of many others is that by putting back student-centered as an alternative, you get in terms of a diversity of different procedures seeking in terms of finding solutions to the problem. Now, this is where an element of where we learned it, of course, was the first university trying this out, which was McMaster. And McMaster did it within the framework of a very specific university setting in Canada. We tried to do it starting with the Faculty of Medicine. And typically in the Faculty of Medicine, you find that the problem setting is typically one which has to do with, as students, but as particularly medical doctors later on will be confronted, is typically with a problem of a patient, a problem of a particular feature which is sensed by the patient and which will be the basis to start figuring out the particular procedure. So to come back to Greg's examples, it's a much more complex environment in the sense that even in terms of the assumptions are being based in terms of where particularly the pain feeling or the other elements are being resented by patients, etc. By putting this in, you can observe that actually you put basically the disciplinary knowledge, as was explained, the limits to some extent of Donna Kowalters are being put at the back. You have really the teaching of figuring out which particular disciplinary framework is relevant to study that problem or to help you in assisting that problem is coming back to some extent in the learning process at the end. So, an interesting feature which I think we have tried to develop, and we've now using this system for about 35 years, it's enshrined within the novelty of the university itself. It's as if you would have also in this country a university which is earmarked to innovate in education. And in that innovation in education is using the students to some extent as the guinea pigs to start developing a different learning process. And of course, then the evaluation, the assessment of that process of problem-based learning, as it's called, is of course essential. Hence, the importance of evaluation to continuously make sure that the system responds to these particular challenges, etc., in terms of getting back that there is indeed a disciplinary knowledge also there, which is more fundamental than just the sort of remembrance which Greg Mازor was talking about. We started with medicine. We have enlarged this throughout all disciplines within the university. The second feature which we introduced, and which Jo Ritsen here present still was basically the key person introducing it, was to move it really up to the international level, to limit or to try to get these problem seeking amongst students as an exercise which would be based amongst students from different cultures, from different nationalities. It's what we call the international classroom, the attempt to try to get a framework which is no longer purely Dutch or local based, but which gets students with different approaches to these problems as they are being addressed. I think this responds to some of the challenges, but you can see it doesn't respond to many of the challenges both Donna and Greg mentioned. We still are within a framework which is strongly within particular faculties, particular fields, particular scientific fields. We still lack the kind of interdisciplinary novelty which is still required and which was given some examples by Donna in the latter part of her talk. So we still have problems there. We're trying to introduce new elements there, such as these elements of colleges, confronting liberal arts and science, being much broader than just economics, business, medicine, psychology, law, but just breaking through these disciplinary barriers by having a much more multidisciplinary approach. And I think these university colleges, something, Hans Adriaansen is here also, which has been tried out in different places in the Netherlands and adds this element of broadening, of crossing these various disciplinary frameworks. But of course, there are many other elements which I've listed here and which still are there and which are still fundamental educational challenges. We still have this framework in which we put these problems to consider students as to some extent the passive receivers in the sense of being identical one to each other. We still have a problem in terms of recognizing the diversity in terms of learning capabilities and interest motivation among students. The student-centered approach we use has a big advantage, and that's the self-discipline among students. If you are within a group of 12 to 15 students, as we have it, it's very clear that there is a social control system amongst the students. Students who do not participate, who do not prepare in terms of having prepared at home, using whatever tools in terms of providing solutions to the problems they're confronted with and discussing them with others and have basically done nothing, say free riders in the system, are immediately punished. It's as if we have sort of altruistic punishment system in our student groups, because immediately the other students will immediately isolate them from the rest of the group. So if you want to be part of the student-centered educational approach, your motivation is triggered, so to say, by the social control system amongst the students in the group. I think this is probably one of the biggest secrets of the success of this system, because we can show in the evaluations that our success rates of this learning system, using the same, still very much remembrance-based assessment procedures, I agree with Greg on this, but we can show in many exercises, many evaluation exercises, that that system produces systematically higher success rates in terms of students passing and being more motivated in terms of learning. Let me say a couple of things with respect to how this system is also interesting in terms of highlighting future challenges, and I will skip this part but bring it back to some of the debates which took place already yesterday here, and in particular with the digital challenges, so to say, similar to the remembrance challenges Greg pointed out with respect to assessment. But it's clear that with this system as it has developed over the last 20 to 30 years, we are totally ill-prepared for a system based on MOOCs. Our whole system is precisely not massive. It's small-scale based. And it's precisely not based on the idea to have across the world, any place, any time, students following courses in a sort of distant way, in whatever format, in the simple MOOCs format or in more sophisticated MOOCs formats. For us, the massive in the word MOOCs is something we cannot use in our system. And so we are reflecting on alternative ways in which we could use the elements of the knowledge as it is being accumulated, and it is, say, the known part as they are existing within the digital world at the global level, how we can bring back that knowledge into our student-centered approach. You could say MOOCs is to some extent making access to education, to best practice education in a typical ex cathedra setting, but according to certain rules and regulation to the rest of the world, and hence having this dramatic impact on access to education across the world. Tremendous opportunities, tremendous promises, with the question continuously about how then to assess at a distance and to motivate students at a distance. In our system, it's exactly the opposite. It's how we get the knowledge of the rest of the world, so to say, inside the group which is discussing the various problems they are being confronted with. And how can we do this? We can do it through the international composition of the student population we have in terms of these small groups, and we can also using it by using more digital methods. That's a little bit what I've called here the SCOPE model, the student-centered online problem-based education business model. It's a model we're trying out, we are reflecting on, but it's very clear that the Google Glasses and other methods of digital technologies in connection with each other in small groups is promising to have this opposite element, that we can include much more knowledge from the outside world into the group, so that the alternatives, the diversity of problem seeking in these problem-based groups can be enhanced. It's a big challenge. And I think, as I've put it here, the higher education system is, I think it was already reflected also this morning. We see this very much over the last years, how universities have to adjust to this system. The higher education system itself is much more being challenged in terms of the various social media, the various ways one can get access to knowledge. The assessment challenges are formidable, and they are formidable within this global digital context, but they're formal, of course, in terms of the content way, as Greg Mازور just explained. But there are all the other features about the distinctions. The whole issue about innovation in higher education is that the risk aversiveness and the lack of innovation in this system is, of course, very much based because it is a system full of rules, routines, and regulations. It's a system whereby the assessment is the guarantee to accreditations, to various other ways in which the controlling authorities, whether they are ministries or whether they are at the levels of finance, are there to make sure that each time content-based education has been delivered and that students to some extent have received numbers of hours of education. Think of the way we use in Europe these European credit points, etc. So it's a system which is a routine system. I think the examples Greg Mازur gave and the examples also of the students being not just in isolation in terms of receiving knowledge, but also in isolation in the assessment, show this kind of, say, Tayloristic mode in which we have introduced education. The challenge is, once you start to innovate in such a system, continues is the issue about that the failures, and surely we will make failures in innovating in that system, will have implications for those generation of students who have followed these particular changes. And hence there is a logic, a very logic, sort of restraint on wanting to innovate too much in the education system. The way we've done it in the Netherlands, and the way I think it could be done in other countries, is just by having pilot cases, having one university, one education system, using in one particular field an alternative system, as it happened here in Maastricht with respect to the medical school. And then seeing to what extent, by evaluating that medical system, you could really show where the system could be improved, where the shortcomings were, where the continuous evaluation system could be adjusted, so to say. You could then try it out in other fields, in law, in business, in economics, in psychology, in even what we could call research-based problems. So the issue is continuously this trial and error method is characteristic basically of innovation in many of the service sectors. We live in a world in which the innovation in the industrial part of our economies is relatively straightforward. We have markets, we have the responses of users in terms of feeding back, in terms of what is the failure in the innovation. And the market system is still a system which gives you very quick insights in terms of a novel idea, novel product, novel process, to what extent it will indeed be successful. And as Greg Mازور highlighted, we have rates of success which are very low. 1 in 10 might well be a success in the long term. In services, this is even much more complex, because in the whole service activities, where we do have these interactions between, for instance, students and teachers within an organizational setting, the characteristic of innovation will be very much time-constrained, context-specific, and hence copying it into other places, in other moments in time, in other contexts, is no guarantee for success. So we enter a field of innovation of trial and error. And that's, to conclude, is really what I like also about being here in this conference, that is, this trial and error must be a conference in which we have, an exercise in which we have highly diversified cases. Because it's only then that we can learn from different contexts, from different methods, and that we can see to what extent the method applied, for instance, within a context of Harvard, or within a context of an Anglo-Saxon country, or within a context of a very different kind of cultural framework, within a context of a very disciplined adult population or a very disciplined youngster population, are very different contexts within which we should try out different educational methods. And it's through this trying out and this experimentation that we actually, just like in many other examples of market learning, social learning, market engineering, that we probably might extract new insights in terms of helping this whole field further in process. And of course, it's a broad field. We've had, I think, very nice arguments here about both the teaching staff, the assessment staff, but I think that at the center is ultimately the interaction with the students and how to improve the learning system with respect to our main clients, i.e. our youngest students. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Huwait. And now our final presenter, Professor Wael Musa, will talk to us about role model program for innovation and entrepreneurship.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizing committee and the chair of the organizing committee, Dr. Salman Malik, for the kind invitation and for the opportunity to talk to you today about a role model program for innovation and entrepreneurship. So first of all, I'm going to talk about just some of the factors of change in higher education and what kind of impact in terms of economical impact that universities bring into. And then I'm going to briefly talk about KFPM and introduce what we have as an ecosystem. And then I'm going to move quickly to what we have in terms of academic innovation and our experiences by showing some examples of the things that we are doing within classrooms and beyond classrooms. And then I'm going to talk about, finally, the innovation and entrepreneurship at KFPM. So if we consider the information technology innovation wave, and we look, in the last 5 decades, we realize that the advancement of the information technology has been tremendously affecting and changing the lifestyle and the working styles. And also, if we take an example of one of the sustainable energy companies over also the last 4 decades, for example, we realize that as they move and advance their technologies, the problems become more complex. And I want to stop here for like a minute here to talk about the complexity. So the problems are complex. They require more sophisticated solutions, entrepreneurial probably solutions, and the competition to hire the best talent plays a big role in the whole advancement of such technologies to solve the problems that are encountered and found by these, the sustainable energy, for example, the sustainable energy sector, for example. Now, at the same time, small businesses have quite helped a lot in job creation, according to these statistics that we see over here. And it attracted investments, and there's a reason for that. For those who are very successful when it comes to having successful businesses, they manage to bring very good return on investment. Now, those small businesses and startups basically are usually evolve around universities. This photo here of the United States shows emerging ecosystems or startup communities that has been published in a Wall Street Journal in 2011, which shows that at different places, different states, these states has been on the map of emerging ecosystems or startup communities, and they really evolve around universities. And just to give you a specific example, if we look into an article that has been released by Forbes in 2013, it says basically that the graduates of both MIT and Stanford has resulted by creating startups, has resulted in a total income of about $5 trillion US. So you can imagine the amount of impact that universities can have on the economy. Now, talking about, and I apologize for that, I don't know, okay, the title is fine, it's here, it's a little bit messy. The factors of change that we talked about, whether it's ICT advancement, the change of life, work styles, the complex problems and the requirements to solve such problems have, of course, changed the way we deliver the teaching or the learning process going from the traditional lecturing to basically MOOCs, for example, as we have been talking nowadays. But these certainly requires, the factor of change requires basically that universities should think about the way they deliver their content and also find groundbreaking approaches to advance their offered curriculum. And this obviously have its impact on the economical growth within the context of the 21st century. And it's a cyclic process as we see it. Now, KFUPM has been established 5 decades ago. It has managed to create very strong academic and research programs. But in the last less than 8 years ago, it had made a strategic decision to build an infrastructure when it comes to innovation and entrepreneurship. And it established an innovation center, a technology transfer office, and now an entrepreneurship institute. And we can see, for example, that over the last 5 years, we jumped from 3 registered patents or 4 registered patents in the United States, and now we have more than 230 registered patents in the United States. And this number is about more than 65% of all the patents registered by all Arabian universities. Not only that, the Innovation Center is also taking care of commercializing those patents and licensing some of the IP, and working hand with the Institute of Entrepreneurship just to build startups. And the university as well established the Dhahran Techno Valley. The valley is within the campus. It hosts R&D centers of multinational corporates, and they are basically, the TTV itself is very unique in the sense that it hosts major companies in energy when it comes particularly also to oil and gas, the upstream and downstream. So, as well, the university is located in a very unique location in the kingdom over here. So if we see on the right-hand side of the slides over here, we are close neighbors to Saudi Aramco. We have our Techno Valley that I mentioned previously. And also now we are developing our business park. At the same time, we are less than about 2 hours from Gawar field, the largest oil field in the world. And also we are less than 1 hour drive to Jubail, where the industrial city is located. So it's very important to focus our efforts when it comes to education and research and leadership in energy fields. Now, in terms of the academic innovation, so we had our second strategic plan that has been executed less than 2 years ago. And if you look into the second goal over here that is in orange, we have put a very strategic, one of the strategic goals is to provide innovative and integrative learning experiences. And I'm going to share with you 3 parts when it comes to that. First of all, we have what's called the undergraduate experience. I've been a student at KFPM. I joined the university in 1995, and I was living on the campus. I was engaged with student clubs with a lot of activities, co-curricular, extracurricular, besides being always, coming to the class, studying and competing with my colleagues. We have the Prep Year, of course, a program that helps the high school graduates to live comfortably in the first year within the campus and offer a very strong English language program as well as basic sciences in English. And then we have many opportunities for fostering innovation, entrepreneurship. We have students who have been going the last probably 3 years spending a complete semester in the US in some of the US universities. So in terms of student-centered learning, we have studied the literature and we found that discussions and teaching others are among the 2 important methodologies that we should be focusing on when it comes to our classroom engagement between the students and faculty. And we studied all types of active learning or student-centered learning based approaches. The out-class has been there for a long time, and now we are working into the in-class activities, and I'm going to share with you one example. But this resulted in something institutional. So we had a project running by the Deanship of Academic Development, and this is a 3-year project that is about student-centered learning, offering training programs, piloting with 10 courses, understanding what are the best practices, what are the things that we need to improve on, providing incentives to faculty, building the infrastructure, and now setting up policies to have this being implemented at all courses whenever needed. This is an example in the electrical engineering department. It's a sophomore course called Introduction to Electrical Systems and Computation. And these are some of the skills that we are putting in terms of objectives for such a course. And the method that we are using basically here is called Jigsaw. It's a team-based learning approach where every student will be learning with his peers, and then they will also be teaching their peers. And so the classroom, for example, if we think about these 2 clusters, we have a study group and a teaching group. So first of all, we divide the students into groups, and each color over here represents a topic that those members of this group will go and study a certain topic, and then at the end, those experts or study group members will go and become teachers when we just split again or reorganize the class, so they just teach each other's and have a better opportunity for them to deliver the content of the material and learn from the experience. The third part, when it comes to academic innovation, is multidisciplinary courses and programs that we have. So one of them is the mechatronics, for example. Students are mechanical engineers who are exposed to different various subjects, electrical engineering, computer sciences, computer engineering. And here I'm going to show you just a video that shows one of the projects that students have done in terms of quality control. And this is, by the way, built by the group of students studying the same course, undergrad students, junior level. So that's one example. Another example is a car that is, tracking the black line, and it's smart enough just when it's about to collide with an object, it just avoid that object. So these are the type of 10 projects that the students are doing during such an example. Another example is introduction to mechanical engineering design. And there is one of the exercises called Save the Egg. So how can I just throw an egg out of a high altitude building without breaking the egg itself? And there's a lot of math and physics behind it, and the students go throughout all of these, but the matter is about fun. So I'm going to just show you a few seconds of the whole video. The video is on YouTube channel, and you can just enjoy it. So
task is to launch an egg from a rooftop that is 10 meters high. You must travel 16 meters to a target, and above all, you must save the egg.
So I'll leave you with this. You are welcome to watch it on YouTube channel of KFPM and MIT together. So this is one of the exercises that we are, having in the courses. So one last thing that the last topic or the last part that I want to focus on here is innovation and entrepreneurship at KFPM. So coming back again to our strategic plan, and we look to the third goal, basically, it talks about technology development. And coming from the incubation center and running the entrepreneurship activities at KFPM, we work closely, side by side with our colleagues in the Innovation Center to understand the model that is developed for innovation within KFPM, starting from the fundamental research and going all the way to reach, the level where we have a technology, ready to be, in the market. And to take it from what's called the techno zone and reach it to the, put it into the economy zone, this requires a lot of entrepreneurship and incubation support from the university. This is an example of one of the cases that we are doing the technology transfer of an IP. And again, it's a matter of learning and putting these into accounts when we are designing our entrepreneurship programs. So here there's a biotech company, a local company in the industry, who's willing to take the risk to take that IP from the paper, from the patent itself, and put it in place, test it, and then now we are developing a technology readiness assessment along with the Tehran Techno Valley company. This is one model, by the way. We are not fixing ourselves to any type model. Another model basically is an IP where a venture capitalist called Blue Vine Ventures, coming from Silicon Valley, and they are studying with a group of 4 or 5 students, entrepreneurs at KFPM. They are still students, the market research of that, around that technology that is expected to come out of that patent. And then once the market research is viable, then there is a chance to build the prototype and then, put it forward and have a launch of a startup. Now, these 2 examples and the previous understanding from the Innovation Center help us, design very well what we can offer in terms of entrepreneurship programs to our students. So a few additional things to consider when designing our programs is the startup creation process, how we start from the idea, how we go and build this culture of entrepreneurship by having a pre-incubation stage. Then take it to the next level. Now we have an idea that sounds commercially viable. Let's go and build a startup and incubate that startup until it becomes a buyout or an IPO, or maybe it fails. So that's one thing that we have to consider. Another thing that we have to consider is very important is the way we deliver these programs and courses. So it's based on experiential learning. It's a flipped classroom. So we had a course running for about a month in our mall at KFPM, within KFPM Mall. It's called Create Entrepreneurs. And the students were just studying based on the Udacity, for example, the Steve Blank website, and some of the material that we give them, and they come in the class. We just talk to them for about like 10, 15 minutes, revise with them the content, and then they work independently in groups for another like 3 hours and a half. So this is one type of a flipped classroom approach that we have. We teach them it's very important that you want to create a business, it's all about customers. If you have customers, it means you have business. So this is something very important that we emphasize to the students. And sometimes we kick them out of the classroom and tell them, this is the mall downstairs, go and talk to the students and pretend that they are customers. A very important thing that we should be talking about and considering when designing our programs is 3 main things. First of all, risk aversion. And our society is very risk averse when it comes to that thing. So this is something very important, and we try just to take them always out of the comfort zone. It's okay, by the way, to go and take this opportunity, but just calculate your risk. So I have only 1 or 2 slides, I promise. The fear of failure, it's another problem. What if I fail? How am I going to look in front of my family? engineers, I've been talking to people in major universities in the US, they tell me that one problem with engineers is that if you give him a problem, a PDE, for example, he will not sleep until he solves the partial differential equation, whether analytically or numerically. And also one thing which is very important is the willingness to share ideas and let go of things. If you want to grow your startup, you have to start splitting the pie and don't be worried about your idea. These are just some of the activities that we are doing, engaging the faculty, the students, and even our alumni who are potential mentors for our programs. And this is how we run our programs when it comes to the entrepreneurship activities. So we have a pre-incubation stage. So we have some of them are already courses that are already there in the business school, and also some of them are now under development. And also we have, very importantly, co-curricular activities. The more activities we have, the better the students will be, because they will learn from the opportunities of failing. So one part is the exploration phase. They develop business models. The second part is, okay, I have a business model, and it means that I have customers. Now it's time to make a prototype, go again and talk to customers. Once I have this ready, I then go and write a business plan that I can just work my finance, and it's a guideline or a manual for me just to make sure that my startup gonna survive at least in the coming 2 or 3 years. And also we launched, established an entrepreneurship club last year. We have a program called Visit a Startup Community. We take a group of students to visit an ecosystem in North America. And also we have launched a program last year called Co-op to Entrepreneurs with our strategic partner, WAID. WAID is the entrepreneurship arm of Saudi Aramco. So all of these are opportunities for students to develop ideas for creation of startups and businesses and be entrepreneur, even if they work within organizations and companies. And then they have the freedom just to go work for any of the existing incubators or join our incubator. This is just quickly the first batch of students who went with Co-op to Entrepreneurs, and one of them is called Electro-AIM, is now making profits after working for 1 year in the incubator with WAID. And just a few takeaways from our experience. First of all, we learned that we have to focus on the university mission if we want to do this business. And we have to focus on the pedagogical value of innovation entrepreneurship as a set of skills, because we don't want our students to be, startup creators, as such. But if they had the opportunity, that's fine. If they are going to a large corporation, they have to have these skills. There is no right or wrong way of doing things. Learning by doing is something essential. We cannot go and bring something, that is happening, for example, at Babson or Caltech or Stanford as such. Okay, we learn from these experiences. We try to emulate as much as we can, but within our context. And finally, the programs has to evolve with time. The programs has to be institutional and sustainable. I'll leave you with this, final slide, a quote by Alvin Toffler, a writer and futurist, who said, "The literate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We managed to finish. We have some time for 1 or 2 questions. We will start from top down to bottom approach. Any questions or comment upstairs? Please give her the mic, and please make it quick and short questions due to time limitations. Can you see something? Any question upstairs? Okay.
Yes, there is.
There is?
Yes, please.
Okay.
First, thank you for the fruitful presentation, and thank you for all the speakers. This is the first session I heard the word curriculum. I think, yes, the faculty are important and the students are important, but still the faculty, if we don't have a certain strategy to build the curriculum according to the innovation strategies or procedures, I think a very important point is missing. So thank you, Professor, for introducing this concept in this last session, because if this conference ends without realizing the importance of curriculum in directing the innovation process in any institution, in any level, it will be, I think, something missing. I want to ask the professor about how, what is the time that you suggest to develop the faculty if they don't have the basic skills for what you mentioned about faculty development? Can we do it? Can we manage this in our institution in one term? I believe that we can do it in 2 months if we prepare a program according to the principles that you suggested, because this is what we really need, especially in Mani University.
Okay,
and
that's,
I don't know about
point
others.
is clear.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any question downstairs here, please?
Thank you very much for the excellent ideas you spread through your excellent presentations. Just a general question. How do you motivate, from your practical experience, how do you motivate faculty members to accept developing their skills? And how do you always convince them to accept their, to be evaluated and develop themselves as well? Thank you very much.
Okay, we can have, seems that, yeah, you start first.
I think one of the ways of enticing them to development is to respect the fact that they are experts. And I think by inviting them in to share what they know, that gets them in the door. And then if the program is carefully structured, it will get them to think about what they do. I mean, that goes back to the point I made about additive. It's not remedial. We're not fixing you. And I think if they understand that, that draws them in. Sort of reward systems. I mean, something that's substantive. I worked in a university. I tell people that where the teaching award was not just money, it was money into your base salary, so that it was a substantial boost year after year to award it. And it doesn't always have to be money. As to accepting evaluation, I think what we have to do is train faculty in formative evaluation first. That we have a program where for the first 3 years, faculty get a feedback, not evaluation. They get continual feedback about what they're doing and what they need to do and how they need to improve. And by the time they get to their 4th year review, we have a 4th year before tenure, then it's evaluative. But by then, they know what their strengths are, they know what their weaknesses are. Another way is not to just use student evaluations. You need a much broader context.
Accepting evaluation, accepting changing their assessment.
I'd say not just the assessment of students, the assessment of faculty too. I mean, in a sense, we've created a system that, you know, prevents faculty from risk-taking. I speak to many faculty who listen to my description of what I do in a classroom, and the first question often is, what does this do to your evaluations? And they're afraid of changing the approach to teaching because they're afraid of lowering their evaluations. As I can testify, however, the evaluation is totally meaningless. I got very high evaluations when I taught a completely traditional class and my students learned next to nothing. Then I switched to interactive teaching, student-centered teaching. My evaluations did not change. The comments changed, but the evaluations did not change because I think they measure probably more charisma than anything else. Yet they learned 3 times as much. So we need to realize that in much assessment, not only that of our students, we rather rely on meaningless metrics than try to be more innovative for the simple reason that the only way to get a reliable, objective metric is to take something that is totally meaningless.
Yes, let me add to what Donna mentioned already in her expose in response to your question. I think there is one area we didn't talk about, and that's career development. I think we're totally biased in our careers within the academic community and universities towards research. And on this we have, of course, all the indicators of research performance, citations, and as they contribute, and I can say this as a rector of a university, there is a tendency to look, of course, at these research performers as the main persons within your university, because they, of course, lead you to rankings and to all sorts of other measures which are taken into account by which the university as a whole performs well. I think it's time to start to put back the balance in terms of education within universities and really to develop career opportunities for staff. And I think once, with prices and the various other examples given by Donna, I think one can really start to develop to get back a balance between the research career and the teaching career, and opening up these opportunities, I think, has been done in many universities, of course, already. But in my case, in our university, this is a weak spot, and it's certainly something we should focus on. So thanks for pointing this out again.
Why?
I just want to share like the experience when it comes to incentives, for example, to patent. So the university had made a decision to count, for example, the patents as like, in terms of promotion when it comes to publications and papers. So 1 point for a single inventor, and so on and so forth. This is one part to incentivize faculty to, for example, to submit disclosures and have issued patents. But what we have been witnessing in the last 6 months is that when it comes to finding those people who are interested to teach entrepreneurship, we just go and visit the department council meeting, show them like 10-slide presentation about what we are doing, who we are, where we exist, come and help us, we need your help. And till now, we have about 20 probably people who are now very much engaged with us, teaching with us on volunteer basis. And until that becomes something, more institutional, I think we need to gain that momentum, keep the momentum, and the motivations high of people.
I thought he meant how do you convince faculty to accept peer evaluation, isn't it?
Can I comment on that? I think that, see, the problem is that teaching really is a joint responsibility, not an individual one, but we treat it like an individual responsibility. We assign one course to one faculty member, another to another one. They each go to to the rooms where they teach, the door closes, and what happens between the walls of that room is between the students and the faculty, the individual faculty member. We don't learn from each other. We don't go and observe each other. I think the idea of a peer evaluation or assessment is not that good. People don't like to be evaluated. I think that many faculty would rather die than be observed by their colleagues. However, creating a culture where you learn from each other, I think, is one that would be very positive. No evaluation, positive comments. I make a habit of visiting classrooms of random colleagues on campus, and each time that I see a class at the business school or in psychology or in history, I see something that I think, wow, I should try that too. So by cultivating a culture where people learn from each other, observe each other, good ideas are going to bubble up to the top and bad ideas are going to slowly die out. And I think that's what we really need to promote, rather than assessment, evaluation, which, again, comes back to this issue of stress, which is not conducive to innovation.
And I'd like to add to that, I absolutely agree. We call it peer observation. We don't call it peer review. But training of your peer reviewers, because what we found in the research is what untrained reviewers do is they look for themselves in the classroom. And I'll give a perfect example. I had a faculty member ask me, who was starting problem-based learning, asked me to come in and watch. Unfortunately, they asked their department chair to come in the same day, and we happened to be sitting next to each other. And it was a beautiful class. He knew how to do it. He had set it up. The students were engaged. The department chair turned to me and said, "I'll come back, Donna, when he's teaching." So I think training people on what to look for, what are the elements to give the feedback on, and what's the purpose of the observation changes the dynamic. You don't look for yourself. You look for student engagement. You look for activity. You look for the quality of questions. You give help, but you know what you're looking for. I tell people literally, if I go into your class and you are standing on your head, but your students are learning or engaged, that's good teaching. And that's different from looking for particulars.
So we don't only need faculty evaluation, faculty development, we need department share development as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think we have to close here because time, and before we go to the final remarks, we'd like to thank our four speakers for their extinguished. And we'll call on Dr. Salim Malik to give us the final remarks of the conference.
Do we stay here?
I don't know.
Do we stay here?
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أشكر لكم حضوركم ومشاركاتكم، وهذا ما يميز هذا المؤتمر وهو معيار نجاح المؤتمر. شكري أيضا لمعالي الوزير ومعالي النائب، وشكرا للجنة المنظمة، وشكرا للجنة العلمية لهذا المؤتمر، ولكل من شارك وحاضر واستحضر في هذا المؤتمر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. تبوأت الجامعات لعدة قرون مضت مكانة فريدة باعتبارها المراكز الرئيسة للمعرفة، فانتقل إليها الطلاب والعلماء طلباً للعلم وبحثاً عن المعلومة في المعارف المتراكمة. وكان التعلم آنذاك يكمن في نقل المعرفة من مصادرها إلى الباحثين عنها، ولكن الظروف الراهنة والتقنية الحديثة غيرت مفهوم نقل المعرفة، وتبعاً لذلك تغيرت وظيفة الجامعة من المفهوم العلمي الحديث. وفي ظل هذا التحول في طرائق نقل المعرفة، رغم التحديات التي تواجه التعليم العالي، فإن توقعات المجتمعات من التعليم العالي أصبحت متعددة ومتزايدة بشكل مضطرد نتيجة للتوسع الكبير في إتاحة فرص التعليم العالي للجميع. أصبحت مؤسسات التعليم العالي تخدم قاعدة أكثر تنوعاً، وتواجه تحديات كثيرة، منها الزيادة في أعداد الطلاب وإتاحة الفرص في التعليم لعدد أكبر منهم، مما استدعى مواكبة هذا التغيير عن طريق الابتكار في التعليم العالي. لقد جاءت التطورات المتسارعة في التقنية بأعباء إضافية على التعليم العالي بنفس القدر الذي أتاحت فيه إيجاد فرص جديدة. فبقدر ما أوجدت التقنية الحديثة ترابط بين دول العالم، فإنها خلقت مزيداً من الضغوط العلمية والسياسية والاقتصادية على الدول، والتي أصبح يحدوها الأمل بأن تعالج الجامعات تلك القضايا حتى أدى الفهم العميق لعملية التعلم مزيداً من الإبداع والابتكار في أساليب التعليم. لقد شهد النموذج الثابت لمؤسسات التعليم العالي في نقل المعرفة المكتسبة في الماضي تغيراً متصلاً، حيث أصبح الابتكار في عالم اليوم أمراً أساسياً للنجاح والتقدم. وعلى الرغم من النظرة الإيجابية لفكرة الابتكار من الناحية العامة، إلا أنه ليس من الواضح دائماً ما يعنيه ذلك المفهوم بشكل ملموس، وتتمثل الإشكالية الأكبر في صعوبة الإقناع بأهمية التغيير وإن تم الاعتراف بالحاجة إليه. تغير العالم خلال العقود الأخيرة نتيجة لتقدم شركات التقنية العملاقة مثل شركة أبل ومايكروسوفت وجوجل وفيسبوك والأفراد المبدعين والمبتكرين. إن كل تغير تقني يغير الطريقة التي نتواصل بها مع الآخرين، ويشكل فرصاً جديدة لتنمية ونقل المعرفة. والبلدان الرائدة في تطوير التقنية عادة ما تكون ذات اقتصاديات قوية، إذ يشكل تبني تقنيات جديدة فرصاً كبيرة لخلق وظائف على نطاق واسع، مما يتيح لرواد الأعمال خلق فرص جديدة مرتبطة بتلك التقنيات، حتى أصبح التقدم التقني أمراً أساسياً لما يعرف بالترف الاقتصادي في الكثير من الدول، على اعتبار أنه ذا قيمة اقتصادية مضافة للمساهمة في التنمية المستدامة للأيدي العاملة الماهرة في سوق العمل. وعلى الطلاب تعلم كيفية تطوير وتحسين التقنية التي تعود بالنفع على مجتمعاتهم وبلدانهم، كما أن عليهم اكتساب المهارات الأساسية في استخدام التقنية، بحيث يراودهم الطموح في ابتكار التقنية التي تفوق نظيراتها في الشركات العملاقة. إن تصميم المقررات بدءاً من الأهداف وبتركيز أقل على محتوى المادة الدراسية أمر أساسي، فالمحتوى الذي كان يدرس في الماضي موجود في الوقت الحاضر على الشبكة الإلكترونية، علماً أن نصف عمر المعلومات التي يتعلمها الطلاب يتقلص نظراً لاحتمال أن بعض ما يتعلمه الطلاب سوف يصبح معلومات تقادم عليها الزمن عند تخرجهم. ومع الكم الهائل من المعلومات المتاحة للطلاب على حاسباتهم الآلية أو هواتفهم الذكية، فإن على الجامعات في الوقت الحاضر أن تنهج طرائق حديثة في تعليم الطلاب على استخدام المعلومات التي يحتاجونها، وذلك بشكل علمي مدروس، حيث أصبح تدريس الطلاب على استخدام المعلومات أجدى من تزويدهم بها. والمستقبل يشير إلى أن طلاب الجامعات سوف يتجهون إلى حقول ومجالات مختلفة للدراسة، ولكن فرص النجاح ستتركز على المهارات النوعية لتكتمل المعرفة التي يكتسبونها. في الوقت الحاضر لا يحرص أرباب العمل في الحصول على مهندسين مهرة فحسب، بل يبحثون عن مهندسين بقدرات خلاقة لحل المشكلات وتصميم الحلول الملائمة. ومدير الشركات الذين تقوم مؤسساتهم بأنشطة دولية أو تستورد منتجات دولية أو تصدر لأسواق عالمية بأمس الحاجة إلى مهارات التواصل بين الثقافات. ويتعين على المصممين في الصناعات قدرتهم على ربط الإمكانيات التقنية والفنية، رغم أن الأهم هو غرس مبدأ الإبداع في أذهان خريجي الجامعات. إن هذه المهارات المهمة لا يمكن تدريسها في القاعات الدراسية المعتادة، وعلى أساتذة الجامعات طرح تساؤلات تستثير أذهان الطلاب من خلال وضع بعض المسائل الصعبة التي تحتاج إلى إجابات. وسينحصر دور الأساتذة في تسهيل إيجاد الحلول المناسبة وتوجيه الطلاب نحوها. وهذا التطور في متغيرات قاعة الدراسة سوف يتطلب الدعم للأساتذة حينما يقومون بتنمية المهارات بطرق وأساليب تدريس جديدة بشكل نشط وتفاعلي. ولد الجيل الجديد وأدوات التقنية الحديثة بين يديه، وأثر ذلك على تعليمه وأفكاره، ولم تعد المحاضرات والمختبرات كافية للتدريس. لقد أصبحت شبكات التواصل الاجتماعي منهجية أساسية في حياة الجيل الحالي، وهي تحمل في طياتها رسائل مهمة عن وسائل التعليم الحديثة، مثل التدريس التفاعلي والمعروف بتعليم الأقران، أو منهجية تعلم الفريق، والذي يركز على استيعاب المعرفة وتطبيقها بدلاً من مجرد نقلها. وسيكون من الضروري في المستقبل التخطيط لتدريس المواد والكيفية التي تدرس بها المواد العلمية. لقد أصبحت الحدود والفواصل بين التخصصات العلمية أقل مما كانت عليه في الماضي، ويمكن الاستشهاد بما قاله ستيف جوبز: إن العنصر الرئيس في نجاحه في شركة أبل كانت دراسته لفن الخط والتقنية. وقد يأتي الابتكار المستقبلي من الجمع بين تخصصين في الدراسة قد يبدوان غير متصلين ببعضهما في الوهلة الأولى، وقبل عقود قليلة ربما لم تكن هناك صلة بين علمي الأحياء والهندسة، ولكن الهندسة الحيوية أصبحت اليوم حقلاً مهماً للدراسة والبحث العلمي. وعلى الجامعات أن تزيد من المرونة لبرامج درجاتها الممنوحة كي تمنح الطلاب من الحرية في الجمع بين تخصصات مختلفة وتشجع الطرائق الجديدة للتفكير. وعلى التعليم العالي إيجاد علاقات جديدة مع القطاع الصناعي ومؤسساته خارج قاعات الدراسة. فمع التوسع في التعليم والتنوع في معدلات قبول الطلاب خاصة في الدراسات العليا، فإن التوظيف أصبح أحد مخرجات التعليم العالي التي تكتسب أهمية متزايدة. وعلى الجامعات العمل بصورة وثيقة مع الجهات الخدمية المستقبلية لإعداد الطلاب بالقدرات الضرورية لقوة العمالة الماهرة، ووضع برامج التعليم التعاوني يتاح فيها للطلاب المزاوجة خلال فترة الدراسة بين الدراسة الأكاديمية والخبرة العملية في مجال التخصص، مما يساعد على دمج الجانب الأكاديمي بالنمو المهني. ويمكن أن تتيح العلاقات الوثيقة بين الجامعات والقطاع الصناعي فوائد إضافية أخرى، بحيث يعطى الطلاب مشكلات حقيقية تواجه القطاع الصناعي ويكلفون بمهمة إيجاد حلول مناسبة كجزء من تجربتهم في التعلم. وهذه الخبرة التي يكون الجميع فيها رابحاً جربت مع بعض كليات إدارة الأعمال والهندسة وحققت نجاحاً مقدراً. لقد أدى تغيير المناخ وحماية البيئة والموارد المحدودة للطاقة الآمنة إلى تحديات كبيرة تواجه دول العالم في الوقت الحاضر. وعلى الرغم من بعض التقدم الذي يمكن إحرازه من خلال توعية المواطنين باستخدام الموارد الطبيعية بعناية أكثر، إلا أن الحاجة إلى الحلول المبتكرة ستكون ضرورية لحماية صحة الأفراد والمجتمعات. فبعض الحلول تأتي من خلال تطوير تقنيات جديدة، بينما تنبثق حلول أخرى جديدة للتفكير وبوضع سياسات حديثة لترشيد الطاقة التي توزع وتستهلك بها الموارد الطبيعية والصناعية. كما أن التحديات الاجتماعية الصعبة مثل توفير رعاية صحية متقدمة وتعليم عالي المستوى لعدد متزايد باضطراد بتكلفة معقولة، وتصميم البنية التحتية للوفاء بالطلب والاستخدام المتزايد يتطلب حلولاً ابتكارية في العقود القادمة. ولن تكون نماذج الماضي قادرة على حل تلك التحديات أو المشاكل الأخرى التي تلوح في الأفق. ويتعين على التعليم العالي بجامعاته القيام بدوره في تنمية وتطوير المهارات وإيجاد الحلول الضرورية للتصدي لهذه المشكلات الاجتماعية المعقدة. إن التقنية قد تمكن من تقديم التعليم بأساليب كثيرة من خلال وسائط متعددة، ولا زلنا في المراحل الأولية لدمج التقنية لتحسين عملية التدريس والتعلم. لقد قطع شوط من المراحل المبكرة للتعليم المفتوح والتعلم عن بعد كي يتم الانتقال إلى المصادر التعليمية المفتوحة، وحتى يتم الوصول إلى المقررات الإلكترونية المفتوحة للجميع، وكلها وسائل ليكون التعليم متاحاً لعدد أكبر من الناس، بحيث يقل الاعتماد على المواقع الجغرافية أو الحالات الشخصية. إن المقررات الإلكترونية المفتوحة للجميع بدأت بوعد مشرق، ولكن جوانب قصورها ظهرت في جوانب الاستخدام التقني لها. وعلى الرغم من أن التقنية من الناحية النظرية تفرض إتاحة فرص التعليم والمساواة فيها، إلا أن الواقع يشير إلى أن التقنيات الحديثة تكون أكثر نجاحاً من نماذج التدريس التقليدية، وقد يمكن التعليم الإلكتروني على الإنترنت من الحصول على المستوى العلمي، ولكن التعليم الافتراضي لا ينمي المهارات والقدرات المطلوبة للنجاح في المستقبل. ولا زالت الحاجة قائمة إلى مزيد من التجريب والتطوير حتى تكون التقنية مصدراً حقيقياً معيناً للتعليم. إن طلاب اليوم سوف يدخلون عالماً لا يمكن التنبؤ به، عالماً مليئاً بالتحديات والفرص، ولن تستطيع الجامعات اتباع نفس النماذج التي استخدمتها لقرون خلت في التدريس والتعلم والبحث العلمي. ولقد ألقت الثورة المعرفية والتقنية في نهاية القرن الماضي مسؤولية جسيمة تتمثل في تزويد خريجي المستقبل بالمعرفة والمهارات والقدرات لإيجاد حلول للمشكلات المستعصية في الوقت الحاضر، ولدمج الجامعات مع المؤسسات الاجتماعية والاقتصادية الأخرى، وإيجاد موارد جديدة للمستقبل. أخيراً، أتمنى أن يكون موضوع المؤتمر وجلساته قد خلق روح الابتكار والإبداع في جامعاتنا بين أساتذتنا وطلابنا، فليكن الابتكار منهجاً والإبداع إنجازاً نفتخر به. وشكراً لكم.